Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries podcast with John. Unfortunately, Hannah's at work at the minute, but I wanted to sneak a cheeky episode out on Monday anyway. So I thought I'd just use the opportunity to muse about a few things that have popped up recently and that I've been thinking about. But don't worry, normal service will be resumed and Hannah will be back shortly. So today's musing was sort of spurred on by a comment on Facebook I got from Ty Prunty. I'm sorry if I've got your name wrong, Ty, but thank you very much for leaving the comments. And it was a comment in response to a picture of my Orange Spine First Edition D&D collection that I posted. Now, since I got to the Wilderness Survival Guide, which I was quite taken with, I've been slowly sort of scouring eBay for copies of the other Orange Spine First Edition AD&D books that weren't going to cost me an arm and a leg. And whilst that's resulted in me getting some varying quality books, I mean, they're all usable, don't get me wrong, but some of them have obviously had harder use than others and have like a little bit of cosmetic damage on, which doesn't bother me. Some of them are ex-library books, some of them have like stickers, one of them has like an old like blank character sheet that someone's obviously made tucked inside of them, and I really like that sort of stuff because it means that these books have been well loved and they've been used. They've not just been sat on like the dusty shelf of a store somewhere forgotten. People have actually been using them to play the game, which I think is really cool, to be honest. But Ty's original comment was basically like, how come you don't talk about the Fate RPG so much anymore? And to be honest, there's no particular reason I can point to as to why I don't talk about Fate a lot. It's not like I have a particular hatred for the system now, or I suppose I have lost the love for it a bit since I don't play it as much, but I still like the system. I still think it's an entertaining game, but I suppose me just saying no reason really wouldn't be a particularly entertaining podcast episode. So I've been thinking about it a little bit, and I think for me the sort of downturn in my love of the Fate system and the sort of upturn in my enjoyment in OSR game systems was that one of the things that first captivated me about Fate when it first came out, in addition to the rules being like hella simple to use, was the fact that you could use it for a wide variety of different genres and different subjects. And there were all these like crazy books coming out covering like different things, whether it's like Jade Punk, which I ran a campaign of, which is like your sort of wuxia style, sort of steampunk-esque style vibe, whether it was the mini settings in Fate worlds like Wild Blue, which is a crazy superhero western that I really enjoy, one of my favourites, down to Dresden Files Accelerated, which I still absolutely love. It's a real sort of bastion of what a great urban fantasy game should be for me. Or if you look at something like Young Centurions, where you're playing sort of young steampunk up-and-coming heroes, again, great stuff. And I still run a fair bit of Fate when I help out GMing with Games on Demand at UK Games Expo. Obviously, that hasn't really happened this year for obvious reasons, but I do take those books along with me. It's just down to whether the players choose those games that I've got in my possession. But I think as time went on, a lot of the sort of releases, like the edge went off them. And that's not to say any of the newer releases coming out were bad or anything like that. They were all well written. Evil Hat Publishing does some amazing books. They also, in addition to Fate, they also publish some of my favourite Power by the Apocalypse games, like Band of Blades, Blades of the Dark, Scum and Villainy, down to things like Monster of the Week. So they do some great stuff. It was just as the books carried on coming out, I sort of felt that I was getting a little less out of them. And as that happened, it also coincided with my work and free time schedule changing, which meant I had less time to run the bewildering array of one-shots that I'd been doing previously. And also, since people were drifting away and doing their own thing, it started to become a bit harder to recruit people for one-shots. And if people don't know you, they're probably less likely to sign up for those one-shots. So I think a combination of those things led to me playing less Fate. And because I wasn't really engaging in it as much and I wasn't getting that good one-shot action, and I've never really seen Fate as the sort of system I'd run a long-term campaign in. And again, that's not to say you can't, that's just how I see it. I started looking around for other games that I could run some long-running campaigns in, because much as I love a one-shot, I am at heart a GM who prefers to run campaigns, and as a player, I prefer to play in campaigns. I always have, I probably always will. It's just my particular preference. So as I was scouting around for books and different systems I could use, it also coincided with there being lots of very creative stuff coming out in terms of like OSR games and stuff like that. Now, as someone who didn't really get to play an awful lot of D&D up until 3rd edition, but who had a lot of the old like D&D board games and stuff like that, but because I live in a small town, I never really got a chance to play them. I sort of looked at it originally and said, oh, well, here's a chance for me to play all those games that like of D&D that I didn't really get a chance to play sort of at the time in my youth, as it were. So I sort of leaned into that. I picked up a couple of OSR retro clones, you know, like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, basic fantasy role-playing and stuff like that. And as I was reading them, there was certainly a nostalgia factor involved. It was all very familiar to me, you know, the class and the level-based system. And I know some people don't like that. That's fine, whatever floats your boat. But I don't mind the class and level system. Am I going to say it's the best system in the world? No, but I just happen to particularly like it. And as I looked around at the Lamentations of the Flame Princess modules, the various modules and adventures that people were bringing out, there was this whole sort of burgeoning, sort of blossoming of creativity in these OSR circles. And granted, sure, if you wanted the old school like dungeon crawling and stuff like that, which is a very easy on-ramp to this sort of game, that was there in spades too. But there were a lot of people adapting the system, sort of, I suppose, pushing the boundaries of what had previously been done with it. And having sort of noticed a sort of downturn in my excitement about Fate books, this really hooked my attention and pulled me in. And that led to me running a few one-shots, a few sort of short campaigns using various OSR systems, and I found that I was really enjoying it. Also, I enjoyed the fact that because all these OSR systems are loosely based on sort of D&D, well, at least the ones I've got are, that I could pretty much sort of copy and paste bits from one system that I liked into another system without the necessity of having to create a sort of fantasy heartbreaker of my own. So, and I'm still doing that to this day. For instance, I'm running a campaign using old school essentials, but I've taken bits out of like the pre-release Dolmenwood playtest stuff. I'm using classes out of some other books that I've got hold of. And I really enjoy that sort of mix and match sort of mentality and that sort of spirit of inventiveness that was captured in the OSR. And like I say, I think just that sort of right place, right time, really. It sort of hit me that just as I was looking around for something to renew my flagging enthusiasm, that there happened to be all these crazy and entertaining like OSR products coming out, which I dived headfirst into, and I have like quite a wide selection of those. I've even gone to the extent, as I was saying at the start, of going back and buying some of the like Orange Spine first edition AD&D books, which I've now like, completed my collection of those. Am I going to run like a full first edition AD&D game? Probably not. But again, there's like I did with the Wilderness Survival Guide, there's a lot I can take inspiration from in there to like pull into my games of old school essentials, Lamentations, Dark Dungeons, Castles and Crusades, basic fantasy, low fantasy gaming, stars without number, you name it, you can pull stuff into it. Do you have to do a bit of adaptation? Yeah, sometimes you do, but it's a hell of a lot easier than making up a system from scratch. So, in a sort of rambly way, I suppose what I'm really trying to say is that I've not really lost my enthusiasm for Fate. I still enjoy it. It's just that it all started to feel a little bit samey for me as I was sort of going along. And every now and again, someone will say, oh, do you fancy like jumping into a Fate game? For instance, I know John Drury is running a game for Matthew's birthday soon, which is a continuation of a game I played ages ago where I played a Valkyrie. I know, a bit odd to imagine, but there you go. That's the beauty of role-playing. And he's going to be sort of running like a one-shot of that for Matthew's birthday. And they've invited me to that. And I've said, yeah, great. I'll happily jump into that. Happy to like pick up the old character, play that again. And who knows, as I was saying to Ty when we were talking about it on Facebook, it might revitalise my love of the Fate system. Who knows? But I would say whilst I'm not a sort of out-and-out advocating and enthusiastic for Fate, I still do have a love for the system. I would happily pick it up and run it. Like I say, unfortunately, my sort of free time is a little bit limited at the moment because I'm still sort of working all hours. My wife's working evenings. So obviously I'm running a couple of games. I'm playing in a campaign game. We're trying to do a couple of podcast episodes a week, trying to still get the normal sort of like household stuff done. All that eats away at the free time. And it means I've not got a great deal more time to fit in these like one shots, which I think is where Fate really shines. So hopefully that's been a bit more of a sort of lengthy and in-depth answer to Ty's query than the one I gave on Facebook. I hope you out there have enjoyed my little sort of ramblings about Fate and OSR games. Let me know if you enjoy this sort of episode with me just sort of rambling about topics that take my interest. I may try and slide a few more in because, like I say, mine and Hannah's work schedules are a bit messed up, so it's actually getting quite difficult for us to sit down together and record a podcast episode. Obviously, my preference is for us both still to be here and do that, and we're still trying to do the monster episodes, and we're hoping to do some GM tips episodes, but we may have to finesse the schedule, especially with like Christmas coming up and like everyone under the sun, including myself and my wife, having a birthday soon. It's getting a little bit more difficult. So I think probably in the new year we're going to look at our schedule and see like what we can do with regards to that. But until then, we're just going to keep trying to put out episodes when we can, and hopefully you guys out there will enjoy them. If you want to get involved in the conversation, maybe tell us if you enjoyed this episode, tell us if you didn't, tell us what you think about Fate, OSR games, etc. If you've got any suggestions for things you'd like to see in future episodes, you can also get in touch. We'll be putting up our Twitter poll for our next monster episode very shortly. You can get in touch by leaving us a message on SpeakPipe. There's a link in the description of this show. Or you can send us an email message to rddrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Until we see you next time, take care, stay safe, and keep gaming.